Suhel Seth, who's joining us, a columnist. Welcome to the show, Suhel. It's very interesting, wouldn't you say? And would you have ever thought that we'd see a day when the biggest geopolitical propaganda war is actually being fought on TikTok between the two big powers of the world today?
See, as you said in your opening remarks, there are two things to this. The people who want to buy a real Birkin will buy a real Birkin.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the first time that fakes have invaded the marketplace. If you go to Venice, in San Marco Square, you will find a lot of people selling fakes. They do that on the streets of Manhattan. They do that all over the world. In fact, in France, they have a very peculiar and interesting rule. If they catch you with a fake, you are the one who's penalized, therefore trying to discourage people from buying fakes. It all depends, Meghna, on who wants what and how happy are they knowing to themselves that they're actually carrying a fake. B, I don't think Donald Trump will have or will be affected so much, both as a person and as president of the United States, with all of this, because the people who are going to wait endlessly for a Birkin or for a Louis Vuitton will continue to do so. In fact, to my mind, China is hurting itself. If I were China, and if I say that I have the same zipper, do what BYD has done in the automotive space, launch a brand that is world-class, which people might buy. You know, they've done that in electronics. They've done that in now automotives, as I mentioned, with BYD. So I don't think the issue is by creating fakes and trying to disrupt. The disruption will happen. There are a lot of people who will buy fakes. But I'm saying that it will not disrupt the Hermeses and the Louis Vuittons to the extent that you imagine. Because even if the pricing goes high, look at what's happening in the UK. Because of taxation, a lot of people are actually going down to France and buying that because there you can get the VAT refund,
Absolutely.
which you can't get in the United Kingdom. So consumers will find a way out of getting the right price. But I don't think the high-end consumer is going to replace a real Birkin with a Chinese Birkin, no matter what you might say.
But Suhel, here's the problem. Not everyone, first of all, can afford a Birkin or a Louis Vuitton or even an Hermes. The point is, if there are those who say that we only care about quality and that is all we want, and then you get someone in your TikTok feed who's saying, listen, we'll give you the same leather, we'll give you the same zipper, we'll give you exactly the same lining as well. Just buy it from us directly, skip the duties, and you get the same quality. Should people be falling into that trap?
It's a great question, but let me tell you, this is what branding is all about. This is what marketing is all about. You know, you don't buy quality, you buy the
That's a no
brand.
from you then.
But it's a fact. You buy the brand. You don't buy, I mean, a Rolex shows you as good a time as any other watch. There's a reason why you buy Rolex.
Fair
There are always three kinds of consumer risks: self-image, social, and performance. When you buy a Rolex, you know that performance will not be an issue. You also know that there'll be no social risk because you're wearing a Rolex. Self-image, you feel good. If you buy a fake, on all three you can suffer. And consumers make these decisions, albeit subconsciously, on these three risks: social, self-image, and performance. Now imagine, as you rightly said, the same quality is infused into a Chinese Birkin, for argument's sake. A, they can't call it a Birkin because they'll be sued silly. B, let's imagine they call it a Birkin. Everyone knows that it's not a Birkin. At least the wearer or the user will know it's not a Birkin. So his self-image, his or her self-image risk is high. Performance risk may be low because, as you said, the zipper is the same, the leather is the same. One of these chaps said, you know, they can withstand sea erosion, all of that. But performance risk may be low. Your self-image and your social risk will be high. Why would you want to do that? And look, let's be honest. You think there aren't fakes in our country? Of course there are.
They are.
And people know what's fake and what's real. We've seen that in jewelry. We're seeing that in leather products. We're seeing that in clothing and apparel. So I don't think there will be a massive tsunami which will inflict replacement of the real McCoy with the Chinese McCoy. I don't think that's going to happen in a hurry.
The Chinese McCoy would be cheaper, but perhaps not exactly the same as it. But Suhel, there is going to be a huge disruption that's already begun of the global supply chains. As we all know, everything is interconnected. What kind of an impact will Trump's tariffs have on that? Because as we all know, it's one thing to say, bring all the manufacturing back to America. It doesn't happen overnight. It is unlikely to happen overnight. What needs to be done from here onwards to tweak the global supply chains? Of course, these are the initial times, but what impact will it have? Is it so easy to say now onwards everything will be made in America when many say that up to 80% it's all made in China?
No, so you asked a very pertinent question. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Number one, American consumers are going to pay far more for the real deal if and when they want that real deal. So Birkins, Louis Vuitton, all of those will become frightfully expensive because of the tariffs that have been imposed. What you have to check is whether the tariffs that are being imposed on a France or an Italy are the same as China. Obviously not.
Of course.
China's got the rough end of the stick, perhaps deservedly so. I'm no fan of China. So the real thing is, will the American consumer pay more? Of course, he or she will pay more. But then that's the choice that consumers make. We have seen a spike in watches, for instance. Today, the second-hand market for watches is huge because there's no supply. Now, that's happening in a non-tariff environment as well. Also, remember, Meghna, people find ways of buying things where those things are cheaper. Do you remember 20 years ago or 15 years ago, people would go to Dubai to shop? Today, shopping in Dubai is 30% more expensive than shopping in London. Earlier, people would shop in London because of the VAT refund. That stopped. So geopolitically, markets shift depending on the taxation provisos that are inflicted upon those markets by their governments. I think long-term, what Trump is trying to do is to bring back manufacturing. But that, to my mind, is heavy-duty manufacturing that he should be focusing on. You know,
Absolutely.
There's something that you cannot replace. You can't have a Ferrari being manufactured in America, to my mind. If they do it, good for them.
And even the most luxurious of leather hand purses, do you really want to take the manufacturing away from a France and an Italy? Of course,
Absolutely.
Of course, you have Giorgia Meloni there. She's currently there. We'll have to wait and see what comes out of those meetings. Of course, remember, the tariff war is still midway through. And I'm going to say midway through because at the end of it, even Donald Trump has said, let's put everything on pause. We are in the middle of negotiations. Today, he says that he's very fond of Giorgia Meloni. But what happens next? Well, I believe only Trump can know. But it's a pleasure, Suhel Seth, to have you on the show. In short, essentially, the battle for luxury isn't just about the pricing, as Suhel Seth has said. It's more about the trust, the tech, the territory, but also, most importantly, the brand. Well, with that, a short break. Don't go anywhere.